Will Byers disappeared on November 6, 1983. That single event kicked off everything in Stranger Things. But what if his story is darker than anyone realized? Based on Season 4 revelations and clues scattered across 4 seasons, there are theories about Will that change everything we thought we knew. When you look at the timeline, the foreshadowing, and Will's unique survival, the evidence points somewhere disturbing. Will Byers might be the key to understanding what the Upside Down actually is, and the price he'll pay for that connection could cost him everything. Vecna chose Will from the very beginning. November 6, 1983, the night Will vanished after playing Dungeons & Dragons with his friends. Season 1 showed a Demogorgon chasing Will home, unlocking the Byers door with some unexplained force and dragging him into the Upside Down. For years, fans assumed the Demogorgon acted alone. Season 4 changed everything. Vecna was revealed as the true master of the Upside Down, controlling creatures through a hive mind connection. This raises a disturbing question. Was the Demogorgon that took Will following orders? And if so, why Will specifically? The evidence suggests this wasn't random. The Demogorgon unlocked Will's front door without touching it. The show never explains whether that ability came from the Demogorgon itself or from Vecna controlling it through the hive mind, which opens the door for a disturbing possibility. Someone with psychic powers wanted Will specifically. Every victim the Demogorgon killed in Season 1 died immediately. Barbara Holland was killed within hours. But Will survived for a week in the Upside Down. Why? The theory suggests Vecna specifically wanted Will alive. Joyce and Hopper found Will in the Upside Down's Hawkins Public Library, wrapped in vines with a tendril down his throat. Will threw up a slug at the end of Season 1, proving something from the Upside Down had attached to him during his time there. This wasn't just exposure, this was infection. The possession in Season 2 wasn't the Mind Flayer acting independently. Season 4 revealed the Mind Flayer is Vecna's puppet, created and controlled by him. When the Mind Flayer possessed Will in Season 2, it was actually Vecna working through the Mind Flayer to maintain his connection to Will. Even after the exorcism where Joyce, Jonathan, and Nancy burned the Mind Flayer out using heaters, Will's connection never fully broke. In Season 3, Will could still sense the Mind Flayer's presence. He knew Billy and Heather were possessed before anyone else. That ability came from whatever happened to him in 1983. But here's the real question. Why did Vecna want Will? What made a 12-year-old kid from Hawkins so important? If you're fascinated by these revelations, hit subscribe with notifications on, because the evidence only gets more disturbing from here. Will unknowingly created the upside-down version of Hawkins. Season 4, Episode 7 dropped one of the biggest mysteries in Stranger Things. Nancy, Steve, Robin, and Eddie entered the Upside Down and went to Nancy's house to get her guns. But the guns weren't there. Nancy checked her diary and discovered the last entry was November 6, 1983, the day Will disappeared. The Upside Down isn't running parallel to the real world. It's frozen in time on the exact day Will was taken. The Duffer Brothers confirmed in a Deadline interview that this mystery would drive Season 5. Ross Duffer said, "The biggest one being we set up how the Upside Down is stuck in time on the day of Will's disappearance. That's the key plot point, the key question that is going to drive our final season." Here's where the theory takes shape. When Eleven banished Henry Creel to Dimension X in 1979, it was a volcanic wasteland with demogorgons and red lightning. No version of Hawkins existed there. But by 1983, when Will arrived, the Upside Down had become a twisted mirror of Hawkins, frozen on November 6, 1983. Something transformed that dimension between 1979 and 1983. Vecna tells Nancy in Season 4 that he'd been busy, so very busy during those years. Many fans believe Vecna built the upside-down version of Hawkins the way a spider builds a web to catch prey. But there's another theory gaining traction in the fandom. What if Will created it? Will Byers survived alone in the Upside Down for a week. Every other victim died within hours. Barb was dead the same night she was taken. Will managed to communicate with his mother through Christmas lights, found shelter in Castle Byers, and stayed ahead of the Demogorgon despite being a terrified 12-year-old. How did he do this? The theory suggests Will has latent psychic abilities similar to Eleven. Under extreme stress and fear, Will unconsciously reached out for something familiar. He needed to know where he was. He needed landmarks he recognized. So his mind bent the Upside Down into the shape of Hawkins. Not consciously, instinctively. A survival mechanism where a child made a nightmare dimension look like home. The Stranger Things tie-in comics, like The Other Side, suggest possibilities about Will's time in the Upside Down, including ideas like shadow walking and dimension bleed. These aren't strict show canon, but they line up with the idea that Will's connection to the Upside Down is deeper than we see on screen. This matches what Will did when he talked to Joyce through the lights in Season 1. He was in the Upside Down, but touching the real world simultaneously. Season 4 shows Henry's early experiences with the alternate dimension, transforming him and awakening his psychokinetic powers. Tie-in material later suggests he disappeared there for a significant amount of time, but the show itself never gives an exact duration. Will spent a week in the Upside Down while it was already under Vecna's influence. If exposure to that dimension transformed Henry, what did 7 days do to Will? Season 4 showed that powerful psychics can shape the Upside Down. Henry transformed the Mind Flayer from formless dust into a giant spider-like entity using his powers. If one powerful psychic could reshape the Mind Flayer, the theory asks, couldn't another powerful psychic, under extreme duress, reshape the entire dimension? The theory suggests Will wasn't just a victim, he was the architect. Will still carries the Mind Flayer inside him. At the end of Season 2, Joyce, Jonathan, and Nancy burned the Mind Flayer out of Will by surrounding him with heaters until the creature couldn't stand the heat. 11 closed the gate at Hawkins' lab. The Demodogs dropped dead, Will seemed free. But Season 3 proved otherwise. In Season 3, Will could sense the Mind Flayer's return before anyone else. At the movies with his friends, he touched the back of his neck and felt that cold sensation. In his house, the feeling returned. When Mike and Lucas made fun of him for wanting to play Dungeons & Dragons, Will destroyed Castle Byers in frustration. Then, the sensation hit again, stronger. He told his friends with certainty, the Mind Flayer is back. Will described the feeling as a presence, like something was there but shouldn't be. He could sense Billy's possession. He could sense when the Mind Flayer was close. Even after the gate was closed, even after the exorcism, Will remained connected to the Upside Down in ways the show never fully explained. Here's where Season 4's revelations become crucial. The Mind Flayer isn't an independent entity. It's a puppet created and controlled by Vecna. When the Mind Flayer possessed Will in Season 2, it was Vecna infecting him with particles that allowed Vecna to see through Will's eyes and speak through Will's mouth. Joyce and Jonathan burned out the Mind Flayer's visible presence. But did they burn out everything? Will threw up that slug at the end of Season 1. When he expelled it, everyone assumed he was clean. But the Mind Flayer possessed him anyway in Season 2, through different spores from the underground tunnels. What if the connection was never fully severed? The Season 3 evidence strongly suggests this. Will didn't need to be directly possessed to sense the Mind Flayer. The connection was already there, dormant but permanent. In Season 2, when Will was possessed, he had moments of lucidity where he could communicate through Morse code. He tapped out "close gate" to tell his friends how to stop the Mind Flayer. But during the possessed moments, the Mind Flayer had complete access to Will's memories. It knew where 11 was hiding. It knew where Hopper and Joyce had gone. It used Will as a spy against his own family. The theory suggests Vecna placed a permanent tether inside Will back in 1983. The slug, the possession, the sensing ability in Season 3 are all connected to that original infection when Will was wrapped in vines in the Upside Down. After everything Will survived, after being rescued twice, the connection to Vecna has never been broken. What did you think of this evidence? Does it change how you see Will's entire arc? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The Phineas Gage foreshadowing points to a horrific sacrifice. Stranger Things. Season 2, Episode 3 featured a scene that many fans now believe was deliberate foreshadowing. Mr. Clark teaches his class about Phineas Gage, a railroad worker who survived a horrific accident in 1848. A tamping iron shot completely through Gage's head, entering through his left cheek and exiting through his skull. The iron destroyed his left eye. Gage miraculously survived. Physically, he seemed fine, but the injury caused a complete personality change. Friends who knew him before the accident started calling him no longer Gage. The frontal lobe damage affected his cognitive function, attention span, and emotional regulation. During this lecture, the camera focuses on Will Byers, not on Dustin, who bursts in late, not on Mike or Lucas. The shot lingers on Will's face as Mr. Clark describes the tamping iron going through Gage's head and destroying his eye. Stranger Things rarely wastes screen time on random educational content. Many fans believe the Phineas Gage story was included specifically to foreshadow what's coming for Will. The theory suggests Will lose his eye as a sacrifice to defeat Vecna, not from an accident, but as a deliberate choice. the only way to break Vecna's hold might require Will to give up his ability to see into the Upside Down. The Vecna connection makes this theory even more unsettling. Vecna's name comes from Dungeons & Dragons lore. In D&D, Vecna is a lich who became a god, famous for two artifacts, the Eye of Vecna and the Hand of Vecna. Players who use these artifacts gain immense power, but lose the corresponding body part. The Eye of Vecna specifically grants the ability to see through illusions, see into other dimensions, and perceive the true nature of reality. Will has been seeing into the Upside Down since Season 1. He has what D&D calls true sight, the ability to perceive things happening in another dimension. That gift came from his time in the Upside Down and his connection to Vecna. But what if that sight is also a curse? What if the only way to break Vecna's hold on Will is to destroy the connection? And what if that connection runs through Will's ability to see? The Phineas Gage comparison suggests more than just physical injury. It suggests transformation. Gage survived but became no longer Gage. If Will loses his eye, whether literally or metaphorically, he might survive but become no longer Will. The shy, sensitive kid who loved drawing and playing Dungeons & Dragons might have to sacrifice everything that made him himself to save Hawkins. This connects to a D&D reference from Season 1, Episode 1. Will's character faces the Demogorgon in Mike's campaign. After Mike's mom interrupts the game, Will tells Mike he actually rolled a 14 and cast Protection, a defensive spell that shields the caster from harm. In D&D, Protection requires sacrifice. The caster gives something up to defend against an attack. Will has been casting Protection since Season 1. He survived the Upside Down by hiding, by running, by being smart instead of strong. But you can't hide forever. Eventually, you have to face the monster head-on, and when that moment comes, the cost might be more than anyone expected. Will's connection makes him key to defeating Vecna. Throughout Stranger Things, Eleven has been positioned as the most powerful character. She opened the first gate. She closed it in Season 2. She defeated the Mind Flayer twice. She banished Vecna to the Upside Down in 1979. But what if defeating Vecna doesn't require raw power? What if it requires something only Will has? Evidence from the show suggests Will has developed a unique connection to the Upside Down. Both Will and Eleven can bridge dimensions in different ways. Eleven used a radio to communicate with Mike from the Void in Season 2. Will used Christmas lights to communicate with Joyce from the Upside Down in Season 1. Both made contact across impossible distances. The D&D framework the show uses is revealing. Eleven's character is a mage, focused on offensive abilities like telekinesis and mind reading. Will's character is a cleric, whose powers come from a divine source. In D&D, clerics are given their powers by a god. In Will's case, that connection runs through the Mind Flayer and ultimately Vecna. When Will was possessed in Season 2, he gained superhuman strength. He broke free from restraints and nearly choked Joyce despite being a 13-year-old kid. That strength came from the Mind Flayer's influence. The theory asks, what if Will retained some residual connection to that power after the possession ended? The theory suggests Will's role isn't to fight alongside Eleven with raw power. It's to reach Vecna from the inside, through their shared connection. Eleven has been trying to kill Vecna through direct confrontation, and it hasn't worked. Maybe brute force isn't the answer. Maybe the only way to defeat Vecna is through someone who shares his connection to the Upside Down at a fundamental level. Will and Vecna share more similarities than Will and Eleven. Both were children when they first encountered alternate dimensions. Both developed lasting changes from that exposure. Both were studied at Hawkins' lab. Both became hosts for the Mind Flayer's consciousness. Both can sense the Upside Down's presence without being directly connected to a gate. This creates a disturbing possibility. What if Will's connection to Vecna, the connection that's caused him so much suffering, is actually the key to ending the threat? What if Will has to embrace that connection, dive deeper into it, to reach Vecna in a way no one else can? Everything points to Will's final sacrifice. Henry Creel's birth year is usually placed around 1947, based on the show's timeline, and the 1959 murder reports, which list him as 12. Will Byers was born in 1971, making Henry 24 when Will was born. Will was 12 when he was taken to the Upside Down by Vecna's Demogorgon. In the current timeline, Will is around 16. Henry was about 12 when he killed his family. Both were kids when their lives were rewritten by their connection to that other dimension, but they reacted to it in completely different ways. Both were sensitive children who loved their families. Both struggled to fit in with peers. Both felt fundamentally different from everyone around them. Both found refuge in fantasy worlds. Both encountered alternate dimensions at a young age and were transformed by the experience. The key difference is choice. Henry Creel chose to kill his family when his powers manifested. He chose to become a monster. He chose to embrace the darkness and reshape the Mind Flayer into a weapon of destruction. Will Byers has chosen the opposite at every turn. He chose to fight the Mind Flayer's possession, using Morse code to help his friends. He chose to warn everyone when danger was near in Season 3, even though it meant facing his trauma again. He chose his friends and family over and over. But what happens when someone who has always chosen good is forced into an impossible situation? What happens when the only way to save everyone is to sacrifice himself? Not just his life, but his identity, his future, his very sense of self. The evidence across 4 seasons suggests that's where the story is heading. Will face a choice: join Vecna and end the suffering, or fight him and risk everything. Let the Upside Down consume Hawkins and survive, or find a way to close it forever, even if he vanishes with it. Stranger Things started with Will Byers. The very first scene of the show is a Dungeons & Dragons game where Mike introduces the Demogorgon and Will rolls his dice. That roll determined everything that followed. The entire series began with Will's disappearance. It makes narrative sense for the story to end with Will as well. The Duffer Brothers have said Season 5 will bring everything full circle. The show opened with Will lost in the Upside Down, desperate and alone. The ending might take him back there, but this time making a conscious choice that determines the fate of both dimensions. Phineas Gage survived his catastrophic injury, but became a different person. Will Byers has survived the Upside Down, the Mind Flayer's possession, and 4 seasons of supernatural horror. But survival doesn't mean remaining unchanged. No longer Gage might become no longer Will. The question isn't whether Will survives. The question is whether the person who survives is still the Will Byers we've been watching, or someone fundamentally transformed by everything he's endured. The most disturbing part of these theories isn't that Will might die, it's that he might become something else entirely, something caught between human and monster, something between dimensions, something that saves Hawkins by giving up everything that made him Will. The final truth about Will Byers. Will Byers disappeared on November 6, 1983. Based on 4 seasons of canonical evidence and the Duffer Brothers' statements that Will's story is central to the final season, here's what the evidence suggests. Will's selection wasn't random. Whether Vecna specifically chose him or Will's latent abilities drew the Upside Down's attention, his survival for a week where others died in hours means something. When Will arrived in the Upside Down, something changed in that dimension. The evidence points to a connection between Will's presence and the fact that the Upside Down froze in time on November 6, 1983. Will carries a permanent connection to the Upside Down that has never been fully severed. The slug he expelled in Season 1, the Mind Flayer's possession in Season 2, his sensing abilities in Season 3, they're all manifestations of the same fundamental connection established during his week in that dimension. The Phineas Gage foreshadowing in Season 2 suggests Will face a sacrifice that transforms who he is. Whether literal or metaphorical, Will losing his sight into the Upside Down might be the key to closing that dimension forever. These theories draw from on-screen canon across all 4 seasons, plus extra hints from the tie-in comics and expanded material about Will's experiences. The Season 2 Phineas Gage scene focusing specifically on Will. The Season 4 revelation that the Upside Down froze on the day Will disappeared. The consistent pattern of Will maintaining a connection to the Upside Down even after supposed exorcisms. The D&D metaphors comparing Will to a cleric whose power comes from a dark god. Stranger Things has been building toward Will's central role since the very first episode. His connection to the Upside Down, his survival where others died, his continued sensing abilities, they all point to Will being more than just another victim. When the final battle comes, the theory suggests Will won't simply fight alongside his friends, he'll stand at the center, the bridge between dimensions, making the choice that determines whether Hawkins survives. The most disturbing theory about Will Byers isn't that he might die saving everyone, It's that he's already been changed into something that's no longer fully the boy who disappeared in 1983. The Will who came back was fundamentally altered, carrying a piece of the Upside Down inside him. Every season has shown this connection deepening rather than breaking, and the final season will likely force Will to fully embrace what he's become to save the people he loves. Will has been Vecna's connection to the real world, whether he knows it or not. A bridge, an anchor, a weapon that doesn't know it's a weapon. And Season 5 will finally reveal what that connection means for Will's fate and Hawkins' survival. If you found this deep dive into Will's darkest theories as disturbing as we did, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Stranger Things Season 5 is coming to Netflix, and after everything we've uncovered about Will's connection to the Upside Down, that finale is going to change everything we thought we knew about this story.